So next, we do have, excuse me, an update from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, the Association of Bay Area Governments, ABAG, better known. And this will be Vikrant Sood, and he's the Regional Economic Development Manager. Let's welcome him.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to lean a little bit because I'm still recovering from an illness. That is a very tough act to follow, Steve. I do not have a PowerPoint presentation, and partly that's because we are still in the process of figuring out what our role should be at the regional level. And I'll talk a little bit about the work that we have done in the last 12 months when we set up this program. But before I begin, I do want to address the question that was raised. There is a lot of federal and state funding that is coming down now and will come down over the next 5 years, and California is missing out on most of it. And part of that is that we're not organized and set up to get some of that funding, and some of it is because of policy decisions made at the federal level. So for example, when the first round of battery manufacturing subsidies were given out by the Department of Energy, it was about an $8 billion program. California got nothing, not one grant to set up any manufacturing or factory facilities here, even though all the research is being done in this state. The latest news is that the $500 million program for a tech hub, setting up a tech hub that was announced by the US EDA and the President's Office, White House. There will be no tech hub based in California. There was some grant given to the the county of Riverside, but as of now, it doesn't seem like even a single tech hub will be located in California, and that is a policy decision. There is a perception that California and the Bay Area are rich communities and don't need federal and state help. And we haven't done a very good job of highlighting the need in some of our left-behind communities and disadvantaged communities that need investment. And need investment not only for the benefit of those communities, but also to accelerate the transition from the fossil fuels to clean energy, the decarbonization of the economy. So there is a very strong role that the Bay Area and California can play in federal policy outcomes, but the current federal policy and the state policy kind of disadvantages the Bay Area and California because of the perception that we don't need any help. So, I think we have to talk about how to influence some of that policy at the state and federal level to make sure that we are at least in the contention, we are at least in the running. Hundreds of billions of dollars have already been allocated, and we have to get our act together because trillions of dollars are going to be allocated in the next 2 or 3 years. And I agree with Stephen that this is one-time funding, but this is one-time funding to seed some of the some of the economic development projects that can have long-term impacts, especially when it comes to infrastructure. So I'll stop there on that topic. Let me go back to just introducing myself. How many people know what MTC and ABAG is? Okay, most of you. So I will not get into a lot of detail on that, but MTC is the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the 9-county Bay Area. We developed the long-range regional transportation plan and the sustainable community strategy, which brings in the land use and housing component in the Bay Area as well. As the Association of Bay Area Governments, we represent all 109 jurisdictions in the 9-county Bay Area. And there are a number of programs, again, we run with the help of local jurisdictions. But our primary goal for ABAG is to help local jurisdictions achieve the goals that they have set for themselves. And economic development is something that has come up multiple times, so which is why we are trying to develop a regional program, but we are still looking for feedback on how we should fashion that economic development program, because we don't want to be stepping on toes. We don't want to be duplicating stuff. We want to add value. And one of the things we've heard repeatedly, and what we realize is our role is to help fund projects, both planning and implementation, that are aligned with local economic development goals, and also the convening role. And I'll talk a little bit about the projects that we are currently working on. As part of the MTC ABAG core work, like I said, we developed the Regional Transportation Plan and the Sustainable Community Strategy, which is called Plan Bay Area. In the latest version of Plan Bay Area, which is currently being updated for the next 4 years, we have a few programs that align with economic development. First of all, we have an economic development chapter right now in a regional plan. It has placeholder policies for now, because we wanted to at least get a start on something. But I think as we do the major update in about 2 or 3 years, it would be important for folks who care about economic development at the local level and see a regional role in helping you achieve those goals. It would be important for you to speak up and identify those policies that MTC and ABAG can further. Let me just see quickly. ABAG is also designated as the Economic Development District for the 8 county Bay Areas. Sonoma County is its own Economic Development District. And I believe there are some local jurisdictions that have their own economic development districts, but essentially as the region's designated district, we are required to do a comprehensive economic development strategy. That is just the requirement to continue to be designated as an EDD. And we will be embarking on that process soon. But why we care about staying as an economic development district is because that opens up access to a lot of state and federal funding. For example, there's a lot of projects, or I should say, there are a lot of grant programs at the US EDA where EDDs are eligible to apply, but not all other entities could. So for example, the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab is not eligible to apply for US EDA funds. So if we partner with LBNL and on a certain project, I will talk about that later, then we act as the pass-through entity. We can apply, we pass through all the funds, and that's one of our roles. Another of our roles is to support, provide letters of support for local projects, because a lot of the federal funding is now requiring that your projects are aligned with the local SEDS or the regional SEDS. Another of our efforts is to help write grants on behalf of our members. And again, I'll talk about that a little bit. What we have seen repeatedly, and this is what Steve also addressed, is that communities that have been left behind, the disadvantaged communities, also obviously don't have the capacity to go after these big grant awards. It's complicated, it's difficult to set aside staff to do just that grant writing work, and that is something we will try and address through some of the programs we have, but also as part of our EDD work. I should also mention that the Priority Production Area grant that Steve mentioned was another initiative that came out of the current Plan Bay Area work, and the idea is that given the spread of, or the distribution of jobs and housing in the Bay Area, there's a big imbalance in the East Bay. We have a lot of housing, not a lot of jobs. We don't have the right type of jobs. So if you're a person who doesn't have a college degree, there's very little opportunities for you to work within the Bay Area. Actually, like even beyond that, there's not a lot of middle-wage jobs in our economy. Manufacturing provides ladders towards middle-wage jobs, and that's one of the things that we want to work on a little bit more. But the idea is, if we can help East Bay communities grow good quality jobs, then the commute that is currently occurring for all the residents who live in the East Bay, traveling to the West Bay, that can be addressed, and the greenhouse gas emission reductions that we get from that is a goal. So the priority production area grants are basically planning grants to communities in the East Bay to plan for receiving or getting, kind of planning for economic development in the future. So for example, the Northern Waterfront Initiative did get one of the grants, and the idea is that there is a lot of industrial land. Industrial land can be redeveloped with investments to be job centers for middle-wage jobs, and that serves the local communities that currently don't have that kind of access to career ladders or economic opportunities. We are participating in the California First, Jobs First, the rebranded California Jobs First process, and I'm guessing Timia will speak a little bit more about that, so I won't get into a lot of detail, but it's a $600 million investment by the state to support grassroots level or bottoms-up economic development work entirely focused on, or almost entirely focused on, the clean energy transition and the opportunities that are provided by the clean energy transition. For jobs that are classified as high road jobs, and again, I don't know how many people are familiar with the terminology. It keeps changing. 10 years ago, it was middle-wage jobs with benefits. Now it's high road jobs. And that effort is ongoing, and there will be a pot of money at the end of the planning work, which will take another year, where communities can then apply for implementation funding. And just on that, so MTC helps local communities with planning money, like the priority production area grants, but also with implementation work. And we want to do more in terms of that implementation work, because we see, so the reason we formed this regional economic development program at MTC ABAG was because of all the federal legislation and the state legislation that are targeting clean energy transition and the decarbonization of our economy. It's, as one of my colleagues says, once in a lifetime opportunity to make change in one generation. And that's a huge potential we don't want to miss. Keeping that in mind, we are starting to do some pilot projects. Now, again, it's very ambitious of us to do that. We don't really have the staff, but the idea is, again, play the convening role to bring stakeholders together to identify projects and then help them apply for state and federal funding for implementation. And one of the things I will talk about today is what we call the next generation battery manufacturing, solid state battery manufacturing innovation hub. And many of you actually provided letters of support for that proposal, so you might already be familiar with it. But the idea is that entities like the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab do a lot of research work. But when the commercialization of that research, we get to that stage, the companies and the facilities and the jobs have gone overseas. Now, if we want to bring those jobs back to the US for various reasons, we won't get into that, national security, whatever reason, we now have an industrial policy at the federal level for the first time, and the money to back it up. So the idea is to work with institutions like Lawrence Berkeley National Lab on projects that they are working on, funded by the Department of Energy, that can help meet our local goals. So for example, if we are able to locate a technology hub in Contra Costa County, let's say on the Richmond Field Station or somewhere on the Northern Waterfront, then that will help grow the jobs over time. So it's, right now we're talking about one facility, but we're also looking at bringing the private sector in. So over time, with the supply chains and the ancillary activities, it could really grow into something that, a cluster of industries that can provide long-term economic development opportunities for Contra Costa County and Solano County. Of course, we need help from the workforce development boards, we need help from local cities, some of the work that Stephen mentioned in terms of streamlining local policies for approvals for new development, cleaning up our sites, making infrastructure investments. There's a lot of work that is involved in putting all that together. But we hope that you will be partnering with us on that to make it a reality. The next steps on that proposal is to now start applying for federal and state funding. There is a Department of Energy grant where they will allocate $50 million towards this facility. So I won't get into the detail, I can provide you information about that, but the first step is to develop a facility that brings together research, prototyping, workforce development, training, all sorts of activities under one umbrella in one facility. And for that, we can access this $50 million from the Department of Energy. There is the California Energy Commission pilot work, pilot battery manufacturing assembly line program that also provides about $35 million towards the same activity. One of the things we have run into is we will be doing a site selection process soon, but one of the things we've run into is, again, where do we get the power from? We can work on the infrastructure improvements, we can work on cleaning up sites, assembling parcels, providing transportation infrastructure, but the power issue has become a bigger and bigger problem. So as an example, Lawrence Berkeley National Lab would like to locate that facility on the Richmond Field Station because they own the land, but they've been waiting for 10 years for a substation upgrade. So all of this work, so they were ready to put a research facility in that place 10 years ago. And now we have a bigger kind of proposal, but at least for that facility itself to be located somewhere, we don't have the power. So another pilot we're working on is community microgrids for industrial users, and that's something that we want to work with PG&E on. They do have $200 million from the state to fund projects like that, where it's not just one facility, it's multiple facilities or an area like an industrial park that comes together and kind of creates a microgrid that serves that industrial park, and it is entirely powered by renewable sources. And we think every obstacle like that could be turned into an economic development opportunity. So that itself will be an industry that will grow to provide grid stabilization solutions, including grid energy storage solutions. And that itself could then be another cluster or an ancillary cluster with the battery hub. So let me just stop there and see if there are any questions. And I think I'm going to lose my voice. Yes.
I hear you saying that PG&E has been a major bottleneck. Is there any opportunity to work with the community choice aggregators like MCE? Or I know East Bay Community Energy just changed its name to something like ADA, I think. Are those entities able to get into this arena to generate the power necessary for industrial facilities like that?
I think yes and no. They have to be part of the solution, but I don't think without PG&E we can kind of solve the issue because the pipeline, so to speak, the transformers and the cables and everything is owned by PG&E. Just as an example, BART, the transit agency, has a goal of getting all of their power from renewable sources in the next 10 years. They've already hit the 50% mark. And they started to think about that as an alternative to PG&E because in 2019, when the grid collapsed, the entire service for BART stopped. And that's not something that we can, from a climate, but also from an economic resilience perspective, that's an unacceptable outcome. So the way they're doing it is they are directly purchasing power from providers in the Central Valley, actually Bakersfield. Wind farms, solar farms, but the issue is you can buy that clean energy, but it still has to transition through the PG&E infrastructure to get to BART. And if that grid collapses, it doesn't matter where the power is generated and how clean it is, it's just not going to get to your location. The city of San Francisco tried to just buy out PG&E's infrastructure, and that didn't go really far. So I think for now, we have to find solutions working with PG&E. And the community choice aggregators like Marin Energy, again, they buy electricity from providers in the Central Valley. It's all renewable energy, but that energy still goes through PG&E's infrastructure. And it's the grid stability and reliability that is the biggest issue. It's not the power generation, because that is already being tackled. It's the infrastructure itself that needs to be addressed. And we think like something like a community microgrid could help be not only a backup, but also a primary source of power for something like industrial and commercial uses.
That's what I was getting at, was building microgrids for new facilities that are not necessarily part of PG&E's infrastructure. Can you do that?
Absolutely. There are some technical challenges to that. Not every organization can go and purchase power. Very few entities in the state can actually do that in the open market. ABAG, surprisingly, is one of them. BOT is another one. And then the community choice aggregators can also do that. I think what we are kind of looking at is maybe the Calistoga model, where the city of Calistoga, because of the wildfires and the power issues they've had in the past, kind of now just the entire city of Calistoga is a community microgrid. So they get power, but the infrastructure is still owned by PG&E, but there is a switch, right? So if PG&E goes down, the switch flips, and all of Calistoga is going to be now served by their own backup, which is all renewable energy and batteries and whatnot, through PG&E's infrastructure. But there is a cutoff. So the grid in Calistoga will not collapse just because the rest of PG&E's infrastructure collapsed. So we can talk about the details, and we are putting together some proposals for pilot projects in Contra Costa County and Solano. So we'd be happy to talk to you about that. And there is funding to now implement some of those ideas. So, there are details we'll need to talk to Marin Community Energy and PG&E about, please.
So thank you, and we've spoken on the phone before. And I'm glad you're saying ABAG and MTC is now talking economic development as opposed to TOD along the BART stations, because we definitely need economic development along the 4 corridor. You mentioned implementation funds. I have 200 plus acres of land shovel ready to go. Just responded to an RFP from Cal, GoBiz, Project Sunday, correct, on Monday. But anyway, my challenge with the alternative energy formula is that many of the jobs, and that's why many of these companies have gone to Idaho and to Nevada, because they're looking for storage. They're looking to store, and you can see this when you drive that 5 going towards LA. You see it right in Fresno County and so forth. Our land is too valuable to be putting these solar panels on several acres of land. We're not creating jobs. So if there are opportunities where we can attract industry, create good paying jobs, and we have expensive land, we're all in about getting involved in the alternative energy and creating some type of a campus.
Sorry, I didn't get the question in that.
That was more of a comment. Yeah. That was more a comment.
That makes sense.
About the alternative energy, and you said you had implementation funds. So I'm going to be following up with you on that.
Well, we will be seeking implementation funds because there is a pot of money that the state has set aside for PG&E to fund those kind of projects. Just as an example of how some of this works together in Solano County, we are looking at a pilot where there is a wastewater treatment plant, which is close to an industrial park, which is close to a high school, which is next to a Amtrak station. And the idea is you connect all those facilities and areas with one community microgrid, it is not only something that supports the economic development goals, because actually if you put in your microgrid, your energy cost halves. It's half what you pay PG&E. And even if you don't use only that renewable source of energy, you still reduce your peak loads. So there's a lot of money to be saved, and that's a direct subsidy to any economic development entity. So like I was saying, so if you have these facilities, there is an interest in creating places for climate resilience. You know, like, so a school is a place where you go to shelter when there is a climate event. The transit system needs to continue to operate, which is Amtrak. There is local sources of energy. So even if most of the solar panels are on top of buildings and in the Central Valley connected to your microgrid, you can capture the methane from the wastewater treatment facility and generate electricity, you know, in whatever form. Either you create green hydrogen or you actually create the energy to power the microgrid. The problem being currently, by current law, the wastewater treatment facility cannot sell electricity or energy to anybody. Not even PG&E. You need special, you know, so there are some regulatory problems, but we're looking at these multiple outcome objective kind of projects that can then be funded by the state, because there is money, right? There was $60 million that was given out by the state in, I think, July for projects like that. There is money, so every time you pay into your utility bill, there is a certain amount set aside for clean energy programs. So resilient libraries, for example, is a project that could be funded. Anyway, I won't go into too much detail. We can talk about that afterwards. I just want to make sure I'm out of time.
Just, if I may, one question from a policy standpoint. We've been having conversations in Contra Costa County over the past several years about what we prioritize in terms of economic development. If you look at far east Contra Costa County, the emphasis has been on not commercial so much development, but more housing, right? Residential. So if you look at cities like Pittsburgh and Antioch, those represent the greatest areas of development. New residential in Pittsburgh now, multifamily units right there on the railroad and elsewhere. That's been the focus. Now, what that does is that it essentially has brought individuals from the western part of the county and other counties, Alameda, San Francisco, to East Contra Costa County. The other piece, so that's one, the housing piece. The other part is transportation. That's certainly one of your areas of purview, and you know my boss sits in the MTC board and has been there for several years. And there has been, correctly so, a focus on beefing up the transportation infrastructure. But the question, though, is that has that beefing up of the transportation infrastructure not further, in fact, facilitated movement of people who have come from west to East County to now live, to simply commute back west to work, because there's not much happening here in terms of actual jobs development. So the question is, with the emphasis on transportation and housing, could it be that in some ways, from a policy standpoint, we're doing more to exacerbate the problem than to actually solve it?
We're on camera, so I can't comment on that. But yes, I think if you look at the current Plan Bay area, there is an emphasis on creating jobs around transit as well. Especially in the East Bay, the idea is that if we grow more jobs in the East Bay, including in Contra Costa and Solano County, that they should cluster around transit, because, again, we are driven by the need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. What we would argue from the economic development program perspective is not all jobs can be located next to transit, and the type of manufacturing jobs that we are looking at that can provide what this area needs for the workers who live here currently, those are more dispersed and are not always served by the traditional model of transit. But locating those jobs here will cut down on the commute of folks who are going now to the West Bay, who will now have to just get to the job on the East Bay, close to where they live. That reduces greenhouse gas emissions as well. So there are various ways of looking at it. I think if you have a perspective, I would say please voice that perspective. There are multiple forces that push, the commission towards certain policies, and I think the counter argument hasn't really been aired as much and as forcefully, I would say. Yes.
Just David, you go off.
Real quickly, we're about 5 minutes, yeah.
David, just to go off your point, I was going to wait till the roundtable, but I think it's urgent that I say this now. Yeah, you're absolutely spot on in that, we're in this inflection point where we're seeing, from the city of Pittsburgh, so yes, everything is 100% spot on, where we're seeing this urgency to create more housing, but it's also in contention with what's been happening in our industrial area, which has been occurring for decades. So for a little bit of context, our industrial areas to the north, along the northern waterfront, have been dominated by two companies for nearly 100 years. One is U.S. Steel, the other is Corteva, formerly the Dow Chemical Company. And for decades, we've just been slowly seeing disinvestment in those areas. And, with the U.S. Steel plant up for sale, and then Corteva is essentially downsizing their operations, but they're leasing it out to other industrial uses, so we're glad they're continuing to invest in that. I just want to iterate the point when we talk about continuing to invest in our industrial lands. Our general plan, which is supposed to go through 2050, we talk about rezoning industrial areas. We are committed to keeping that area zone industrial for the next 30 years or so. The city has made a commitment to ensuring that that area remains industrial land. We want to see the future job centers in that area. We want to see jobs in that area. And I'll speak a little bit more about that on our roundtable updates, but we are committed to ensuring that in the next 30 years or so, we continue to see job growth and innovation. And we're already seeing a lot of that attention as well, but I'll wait till the roundtable to talk more about it.
That's a good point. Just to think about, why did the Tesla battery plant not locate in the northern waterfront? There were lots of reasons why. The state wasn't going to provide subsidies for Tesla, so they went to a state that did provide subsidies. But I think there was a lot going for the Bay Area. And if you think about the city of Pittsburgh making a case versus the state of Nevada and the governor making the case directly, like there is, who do you take more seriously? And if you want to locate something in the city of Pittsburgh, do you have the parcels all assembled? Are they clean? Are they ready to be developed? So there's a lot of, I think, work we need to do to get things, I don't want to say shovel ready, because you have to shovel just to improve the infrastructure as well, so that people, companies can come and locate, and it's not a, but again, that's a case study of what do we need to do? We have, the Tesla, it's not a lost cause, obviously, because there are other businesses that will locate here. But again, what did not work there is worth pondering over.
Perfect. All right, well, I think that was perfect timing, and we're still a little ahead of schedule, but to make sure that we are able to complete our forum on time. Thank you. First, let's thank Vikrant for his information. Absolutely.